Still good morning. How are you? Oh, very sad, very sad. Bit more enthusiasm. How are you? Still sad. Anyway, we should start with that. Beyond the hype. That's where we're going to be talking about today. Beyond the hype of practical AI and machine learning. But we've been using machine learning for a while. David, what's the story here?
Well, I think in financial services, we've been harnessing AI for well over a decade and a half, really hands-on with it. But it feels like we're in absolute peak mania as it relates to generative artificial intelligence. So it's almost like the industry's just stood up and took notice overnight. And it's not just insurance, it's across virtually every industry at the moment. So I think for a lot of us as technologists, a little bit surprising. We've seen it coming. But sometimes you've got to get this technology in the hands of the masses and that they start to realize that it is going to have such a profound impact on what we're doing.
Saurabh, what's your view on this?
Yeah, machine learning has been there for a long, long time in insurance. I mean, when you look at it, predictive modeling has been the core of insurance, and it's still the core of insurance. I mean, for the prediction of the risks as well as, pricing, claims, fraud, I mean, everything relates to that. And then when you look at machine learning in one form or the other has always existed. I mean, initially when we started off in the insurance industry, it was about probability and linear regression techniques, and then we evolved gradually to GLM, which is generalized linear models, and along with decision trees. And eventually then, as the more and more data complexity started coming into play, real-time data, I think we went ahead with more tools like ensemble learning. I mean, that's an evolution of the machine learning. Ensemble learning came into play, and then further to that, now we even have auto ML models for underwriting and in particular, right? So now when you look at claims again, you have fraud detection and analytics models which are in play. And it's not that, so AI has been some part of AI. So AI is a broad stream, I would say. Under that, when you look at statistical tools or machine learning tools or in various forms in decision trees, I think it has always existed, and it will always exist as far as insurance industry is concerned.
Same in reinsurance, Lauren?
Well, I think we just have to thank Sam Altman at OpenAI, right? So machine learning has been around for quite some time. We have been using this. To be quite honest, I wouldn't say just reinsurance, but the insurance industry has been one of the earliest adopters of AI. We started with rules-based. We continue to use rule-based extensively, and we've adopted machine learning as far back as 5 to 10 years ago. What has been really, really interesting is Gen AI has ignited so much interest because machine learning, historically, people think about that as confined to all the data scientists. And so there wasn't really as much interest, right? With Gen AI, we now have a broader level of sensitivity and application, et cetera, and that has brought back the interest. Having said that, from a Swiss Re perspective, machine learning, there's still a long ways to go for us to actually optimize, our processes, our workflows, et cetera. We're actually only at the very early stages, in terms of identifying what are some of those most impactful use cases for Gen AI. And when I say that, it really goes back to the core areas that you're talking about, with regards to claims, underwriting, portfolio management, and so forth. Other areas, probably a little bit further, but in terms of what's really core to our industry, I think we're still evaluating. And, at Swiss Re, we are trying, and we have launched actually our first Gen AI tool.
More in a moment. Sharon, what do you think about the historical perspective of machine learning?
I totally agree with Lauren. I see the 3 phases in terms of the evolution. So machine learning first, and then AI. This purely from a non-technical perspective, right? Machine learning, AI, and then Gen AI. So I think that machine learning, we have been using it for some years in the insurance industry. So I think the really exciting thing for me is not the historical usage of machine learning, but how it has evolved, right, into Gen AI, and that's where I see the real power and potential.
What sort of productivity improvements are you seeing with AI?
So I think the power of AI is in what I call the double S, speed and scale. So I think the advantage is it's able to really ingest data at scale, and then generate the output at speed. So this speed and scale combination, right, really does give us quite a lot of productivity uplifts. So for example, in customer service, we see like a 65% uplift in productivity when we implemented Gen AI for email handling.
So it's automating the email handling?
Yes. So Gen AI, ingests the policy wording, for example, and then ingest the customer inquiry, and then it generates a response. So I think that's quite a powerful use case for me that I've experienced. Of course, in model claims as well, we see AI being able to really improve the productivity for pre-screening. So like fraud checks, right? So typically it may take up to 180 minutes per case, but with AI, it really just does that, snap of a finger. So these are some of the productivity gains I've
What's
seen.
the giveaway that you'd like to share with the audience about the fraud? What's one of the key aspects that says this is a fraud for AI to detect?
Okay, so what we did is we partnered with Fermion to train the AI model, right? So it goes through, I think, 39 parameters, and then it gives a fraud risk score. So I think that's really powerful because it prompts the claims assessor, right? Is this likely to be a fraud? And then, the fraud assessor is going to pay more attention to cases with a higher risk score.
Interesting. Productivity enhancements for reinsurance?
We look at, so we're from the reinsurance solutions. So I'm from the reinsurance solutions part, and we look at this, broadly, not just for reinsurers, but also for insurance, primary insurance companies. It really is, at this point, for machine learning, it can be quite substantial. So, in terms of, improving, let's say, STP rates, on underwriting, we look at this in percentage points that, depending on the size of the business, we're talking about millions of dollars that can come through. We are talking about, productivity also from a perspective of, we have underwriters who are extremely seasoned all around the world, but it's not necessarily the most exciting role that perhaps, younger, students coming out of universities are, looking to enter. And so in terms of solving a challenge where we're not able to hire as many underwriters, this is a solution, for us. So some of it is definitely substantive, hard, savings, right? And new growth, but some of it also is just solving areas around, lack of talent or difficulty in actually, acquiring talent.
So it's replacing humans.
I think to a certain degree, right? But I'm not sure if it's ever going to be 100%. It's just what can we do more with less, right?
With less humans. And what does it do? It improves the productivity? Does it improve the consistency?
Well, consistency, yes, but I think that's something that we have to actually think about, very carefully as well, right? Anytime you actually start to embrace, any model, AI, I would think that, we'd have to be very careful around, how these models operate over time, how norms change over time, how regulatory expectations change over time, and the question then becomes is, how do we continue to monitor and track and make sure these models actually keep up, right, with the specs that are required, not just from regulators, not just from, the business, but most importantly from a customer perspective, right? Because culturally, I think Paul Hughes from Underwrite Me mentioned that as well. As it changes, we have to stay on top of that.
So for Liberty, where are you seeing the productivity enhancements?
mostly in non-core operations. So when we talk about not in primarily in underwriting per se, but more in the areas of customer service, claims handling centers, that's where we have seen remarkable improvements in terms of, and we have mostly implemented, AI vision or some of the machine learning tools within the, and even the RPA. RPA does not qualify, by the way, as AI or ML, but we implemented, and that's where we saw the productivity gains coming up. And it's in two areas. One is basically you can look at hard dollar savings, and then the other one is around the skills so from doing mundane tasks, like as a claims handler, you move up the chain in terms of handling more complex tasks, which goes towards, let's say, fraud analytics. Rather than, inspecting those papers every day, you move to higher value tasks. And that's where we look at dollar savings as well as the productivity gains. In some of the areas, some of the markets, we saw as high as about 40% improvement in terms of the productivity, especially in the claims handling centers and call centers.
Improvement in speed of management or NPS score, or in what way?
Speed was the primary factor.
And did NPS rise as well?
There was a rise in the NPS, especially in some of the markets where it was high transaction, and that's where we saw an increase, a slight impact. I would not say it was like phenomenal, but a few points increase, but that was a good proof of concept for us.
Interesting. bolttech, where's bolttech sort of deploying and getting productivity improvements?
I think I've been quoted as saying previously it feels a bit like the movie title. It's AI, everything, everywhere and all at once. And I know that probably sounds...
I never understood that movie to begin with, but anyway.
Well, it probably sounds a bit unfocused, but it's not. It's out of necessity. And I think even in areas where we haven't made a conscious decision to build AI, many of our partners are turning on AI capabilities anyway, so we're getting the benefit of that. I think, just to call out a few specifics, so I think claims is a very obvious area. We sell, for example, device protection. It's a fairly low ticket size product, and out of absolute necessity, we've had to deliver high levels of automation. So I think there's been a very obvious application for AI. Shifting to another area, we run a thing called our choice model, which is where we serve up multiple product choices for a particular quotation request that a customer brings in. For us, it's really, really important that we can onboard new products and carriers onto our platform at speed. So we've been able to improve 50 or 60% in a relatively short space of time using AI.
So, we talk about there's a lot of discussion about AI and the sort of short-term impact versus the long-term impact. How do you see that?
Yeah, I like that question. Some of you might have heard, I think Bill Gates is often referred to Roy Amara, or Amara's Law, and that's a very simple principle from a very well-renowned futurist who spoke about the fact that we tend to overestimate the impact of new technology in the short run, but we underestimate its impact in the long run. And I think it's particularly relevant with things like generative AI. If we had a Gartner analyst in the room, they would probably say that Gen AI is right at the peak of inflated expectations as far as their hype cycle of emerging technology. That's something where all of us, I think, in the industry are grappling with. And sort of to the point I made earlier, the fact that there's this absolute mania around generative AI means that you're getting very, very disparate views. You've got views in one camp that none of us are going to have jobs anymore. We're all going to be replaced, and there's no job that's spared, all the way through to Gen AI is just another passing fad, and we'll adapt to the next thing that comes along. I think from my own personal view, I do believe in that longer run cycle. AI is still going to be the most disruptive force multiplier in terms of change in our industry that we've ever seen. As an industry, we haven't gone through a huge amount of change. The value chain itself, when you think about the value chain of insurance, it really hasn't changed almost since inception. When you think about onboarding, underwriting, claims, servicing, we're now starting to enter into this era of prediction and prevention.
So what do you think will be the biggest long term? Do you have a sort of a vision, a view of what that you can share with us about how you think AI will impact in the longer term?
Well, I think in the longer run, I think it does go back to the value chain. If you think about how insurance companies have been able to offer risk transfer at its core, that's fundamentally what we do in the industry. But almost out of necessity now, I think insurance companies are going to be forced to think in a different paradigm around what is the value chain of insurance. So with all of the technology we have at our fingertips, with the data that we have available to us today, structured and unstructured data, we have the ability to predict. I think we heard about that in the example just before. We've got some of the smartest math brains in the world working in our industry. So I have confidence, you know, in that longer run that we are going to be able to build some super intelligent predictive algorithms. But I think the second part of it is just because you can predict doesn't mean you can prevent. And I think that starts to take us into a realm of actually saying, you know, do customers want to permission our industry with the data that it takes to create some form of intervention? If we've created a predictive model that says we know with a high degree of probability there's going to be a vehicle accident or someone's health is at risk or their pet's going to be lost or whatever that loss event, will they allow an intervention, whether that's a haptic alert or a text message or an in-app notification, whatever that happens to be, or even longer term education that creates that prevention. And I think we're always going to see, no matter how smart these algorithms are that we're building, we're going to see a failure rate. It's never going to be 100%, and that then takes us into the world of recovery. And I think already today the industry does some pretty good things as far as recovery, but it's not necessarily orchestrated in a way that's so timely and immediate in a way that generative AI can do. So it's almost the combination of predictive and generative AI working hand in hand to create a vastly different customer experience, and I think also fundamentally driving down loss ratios. You know, if we as an industry can harness this technology to create a 40, 50, 60% reduction in loss ratios, imagine the impact on carrier profitability and imagine the impact on humanity.
I suspect that will go in lower premiums, but or higher commissions. But nevertheless, let's not go there. Liberty. I mean, how do you see sort of the long-term impact of AI?
Well, I mean, I would say we just started on the AI front. I mean, there's a lot to do, and in particular, I mean, Lauren was mentioning about Gen AI. So Gen AI also I think that's where we will see a lot more application, in particular because of the usability in terms of, you know, you don't need to be a data scientist at times to be able to use some of those models. And the other thing which we definitely see from a long-term point of view is the use of AI in the, so earlier I talked a little bit about the non-core applications, but eventually, which is like call centers, claims handling centers, etc. But as we go forward, we see a lot more application going into the claims and underwriting itself, because as David was kind of pointing out towards the loss ratio is another area where we are seeing, I mean, there could be a potential application. Now, the adoption could be slow because there's a lot of unstructured data which exists as of today. And moving away from that unstructured data to the structured data, that's going to be a journey. And different organizations and different carriers are at the different maturity levels in that journey. So depending on that, what we definitely think is claims loss ratios, as well as the application in the other core areas like underwriting could be an application.
Lauren, as we think about the future, I mean, what's the governance issues here? What's the responsible AI issues we need to be thinking about?
Look, I mean, I think this is not something about the future. So responsible AI is a topic that has come up. We see it come up and become much more relevant now. We're hearing a lot more from C-suites, over the last 6 to 9 months in particular. But the reality is, because we have been using machine learning models, especially, this has actually been something that at Swiss Re we have been, very, very focused on. And so there's really, 3 components. If we actually break it down from a responsible AI perspective, before you actually decide to build a model, right? What exactly is the purpose? As you build a model and are ready to put it into production, the testing, the explainability, the transparency, the bias, the ethics around it, what does that actually look like? And, once you do put it into production, what is that then? How does that performance actually come out? And is it actually up to par, right? But again, earlier I also referenced that it's really important to continue to monitor post-release, just simply because social norms, cultural norms, regulatory requirements, continue to change. So, at Swiss Re, what we have done actually is put together a fairly comprehensive framework. And, since 2022, we've applied this framework and looked at 15 various points. And every single model that we develop, either for ourselves or for primary insurers, basically go through this process. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg, right? Because at the end of the day, that responsibility still is there to provide a certain level of trust. And the trust, is important only if you can actually integrate whatever it is that you have built into your workflow. So we actually take a look and think about responsible AI relative to what are we trying to change? How do we integrate? And, is it putting aside, the very tactical components of ethics, of transparency, et cetera, does this actually support, what our goal was to begin with, to build these models and implement AI? And I think that's one that we should never lose sight of, is at the end of the day, no matter how exciting the technology is, this is about business. This is about, very tangible impact that we need to see at the bottom line.
Sharon, how do you build in governance to, say, the use cases that you see emerging into the future?
I was hoping that you're not going to ask me that question, because I don't think I can top Lauren's answer. I think in general, because for us, the adoption is still at quite a nascent stage. We just go by MAS FIT principles. Having said that, I think that we need to deep dive a little bit more into the granularity of what it actually means, right? I mean, those are principles, but how we operationalize it in the use of AI, as Lauren said, right, post-production, is it giving the outcomes that it is supposed to? I think that's something that we all need to be careful when we're implementing AI.
Now, what's fascinating to me is that we've all talked back office, but surely AI in the use of front office sales processes is a critical importance and highly productive. David, where are you on this?
Good question as well. I'd venture to suggest that probably every insurer and many insurtechs are actually out there trying to harness AI in front-end sales and agency particularly. I didn't come from the insurance industry by background, so I remember, almost a decade ago, one of the first things I had to get my head around is why do we have so many of these agents between us and the end customer in the industry? I'm not necessarily saying that agents are going to disappear, but I think they're going to be heavily augmented with AI capabilities, and they'll move up the value curve, and they'll use AI to do things like product recommendation and the like. I think we already got a taste several years ago when Sundar Pichai from Google got up and spoke about Google Duplex and saw the human likeness that can now be created with technology that's widely available. So customers ultimately, I think, are going to make the decision. Are they comfortable dealing with an AI rather than a human? I think for some interactions that will be the case, and it already is the case. We've got quite a number of initiatives going on around broadly digital sales that really are just a series of experiments and understanding whether customers actually like that form of interaction or not. And then also extending those into a lot of the servicing interactions as well.
So Liberty in a number of Asian markets has human agents. How are you deploying, how can you improve their productivity? Take your acquisition in Malaysia, for example.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk specifically about, let's say, the productivity gains, it's multiple technologies. It's not necessarily going to be AI or ML. It could be multiple technologies you can deploy, like even the age-old RPAs. RPA could help to kind of improve the productivity in several areas of the business. Now, one aspect is that, we always would want to go with the latest and the greatest technology, but that costs money. I think it boils down to the value which you derive out of that technology which we are implementing. And that's where, in order to improve the productivity, and I would say in most of the markets, we are still kind of looking at different versions of RPA, as well as some forms of ML to be able to help in those areas. Now, but you were talking about distribution in particular, right? So when we look at distribution, it's quite interesting because the model is kind of evolving. We still have a lot of traditional products, but at the same time, we have the UBI, the usage-based insurance, and ecosystem where you're leveraging the micro insurance and stuff. But again, if I were to look at as a broad part of the book, it's less than 2% of the
Very
overall revenue. So, but over a period of time, yes, there is a potential to increase, but that's again going to be driven by what the customers are looking at. And in areas like, certain pockets like travel, probably yes. Motor, probably yes. But when it comes to health or life, we still think we are a little far from implementing some of those usage-based insurance sort of products. So,
interesting.
I think it's fairly covered. I guess the other angle, I would say, from a productivity perspective, we're starting to actually see changes in how the employees at Swiss Re actually work. Last month, we actually released Microsoft Copilot and gave access to every single employee. And we're starting actually, I think within a week of releasing that, we actually started to see, significant improvement in, meeting notes. If you're on a Teams meeting, the person who actually has to take notes doesn't love that job, right? But we're starting to see very interesting behavioral changes because, people are much more engaged in the meeting. They don't have to worry about taking notes. We've got folks who enter a meeting, halfway through, are able to ask Copilot, what happened? Can you recap for me? And so, over time, I think it's going to be a little bit hard to measure, exactly what that productivity impact is. But what's been pleasantly surprising for me, looking at myself and my colleagues, is how it changes our working styles. Yeah, and so that's actually one of the things that, when I talk to people around, Gen AI and productivity, we don't tend to cover as much, but I expect that will change. It's important because this is actually going to inspire and drive a broader AI culture throughout Swiss Re, which for us is very important because, there is an expectation from our clients that we provide the kind of advice that all of you in this room are actually looking for from us.
Final comment, Sharon?
I love Copilot, actually. So I'm not sure about the rest of you, but I use Copilot to prepare for the conference. I think definitely lots of productivity gains. So I think beyond the big cases that we spoke about, right? I think the beauty of Copilot is in improving productivity in daily tasks. So like minutes taking, as you said, it can convert like an entire paper into PowerPoint slides, right? How great is that? But the caveat, I think, is we did that once with minute taking, and it hallucinated, So we have to be careful with the use.
It hallucinated in the meeting?
It hallucinated.
Fantastic. That's sort of the minutes you really need. Ladies and gentlemen, will you thank the panel?